It was a bright afternoon when the war began, but no one knew it yet. The world was still, the air was warm, and people went about their usual lives. In a small, quiet town, a girl named Mara walked along the edge of a dusty road. She was tall, for her age, with long black hair that shimmered like the night sky. Mara had always felt like she didn't quite fit in with the other children, her body larger and fuller than the others, even though she was only a teenager. She had never asked for the attention her size brought, but it was impossible to ignore that her stepfather, Baird, was a hard man, and Mara never understood him. He'd never been kind to her, not since her mother passed away. At first he had seemed like a different person, someone who had taken her mother's death to heart and tried to protect Mara. But as the years went by, something in him had changed. Mara was beginning to suspect he wasn't the man he appeared to be. It was on one of these peaceful afternoons when the dark truth started to unfold. Mara's stepfather had been acting strange lately, his face always tight, his eyes full of secrets. It was clear something was troubling him. He avoided her eyes whenever she walked into the room, and there was an odd coldness in his voice whenever he spoke to her. But today was different. Today, Baird had a look on his face that made her stomach twist with unease. "Get ready, Mara," Baird said, his voice lower than usual. "We're going out." Mara felt a chill run through her. She didn't remember ever going anywhere special with him. "Where are we going?" she asked cautiously, her brow furrowed. Baird's lips curled into a thin, almost mocking smile. "You'll see soon enough. You don't need to know everything." Mara hesitated, but said nothing more. She knew better than to argue with him. He didn't give her the chance. Without another word, he led her to the old truck parked outside their home. The ride was long and silent, the road stretching endlessly ahead, the landscape around them becoming more desolate with every mile. After what felt like an eternity, they arrived at a small rundown village that Mara didn't recognize. The houses were dilapidated, the air thick with the scent of smoke and decay. The place felt wrong, as though it was hiding something beneath the surface, something dark. Baird parked the truck near an old tavern at the edge of the village and gestured for Mara to follow him. Inside, the tavern was dimly lit, the air filled with the sound of murmuring voices and the clink of glasses. Mara felt out of place, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never been in a place like this, and the people here made her uneasy. They watched her as she walked in, eyes flicking over her body, some with curiosity, others with something darker. Baird walked up to a man sitting at the bar, a grizzled man with a long beard and piercing eyes. They spoke in low voices, and Mara couldn't hear their conversation, but she felt a shift in the atmosphere, as if the air itself had thickened. After a while, Baird turned back to her. "Mara, this is where you will stay," he said, his voice cold. "You'll be fine here." Mara felt her knees go weak. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Baird didn't respond directly. Instead, he handed a small pouch of coins to the man at the bar, who grinned. The man's grin sent a chill through Mara. She stepped backward, her heart racing as the truth began to dawn on her. She had been brought here for a reason, and that reason was something she wasn't ready to understand. As Baird walked out of the tavern, leaving her behind, Mara was left standing there, feeling the weight of the world crash down on her. The man at the bar stood up and approached her, his eyes scanning her body with an unsettling hunger. "Don't worry, girl," he said with a laugh. "You'll fit right in." Mara tried to back away, but her legs wouldn't move. She was paralyzed by fear, her body trembling with terror. The man reached out to touch her arm, but before he could, the door swung open. A loud voice called from the entrance. "Enough of this, Marcus." Mara's head snapped toward the door, her heart pounding with a new kind of hope. But she wasn't sure if it was hope or something else. The figure in the doorway was tall and broad-shouldered, a silhouette of strength and authority. As the figure stepped into the light, Mara's breath caught in her throat. It was a woman. A woman with eyes that burned with the intensity of 1,000 storms. She looked around the room, her gaze sharp and unwavering. The man at the bar seemed to hesitate for a moment, then backed off, his face flickering with uncertainty. The woman looked at Mara. "Come with me," she said firmly, and Mara didn't think twice. She followed the woman, her heart still racing. But for the first time since arriving, she felt a spark of something other than fear. Something close to hope. Mara followed the woman through the tavern's back door and into the narrow alley behind it. The woman walked with purpose, her steps quick and steady, but there was something graceful about her, as though she was used to moving swiftly through dangerous places. Mara couldn't help but keep her eyes on the woman, wondering who she was, why she had come to her rescue, and whether this was truly the help she had been waiting for. They walked for several minutes in silence. The only sounds the soft rustle of the woman's boots against the gravel and the distant murmur of the tavern. Mara's mind raced, questions piling on top of one another, but she didn't dare speak. She knew better than to ask too many questions. When she didn't understand the situation. Finally, they reached a small, hidden house at the edge of the village, far from the tavern's noise. It looked much more like a home than anything Mara had seen before. The windows were clean, and a small garden with flowers stood in the yard, a stark contrast to the grimy, broken-down buildings they had passed. The woman pushed open the wooden door and motioned for Mara to enter. Inside, the house was simple but welcoming. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the scent of fresh bread filled the air. Mara's stomach growled loudly, and she felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. But the woman just smiled faintly. "You're hungry," she said, her voice gentle now, almost like a soothing melody compared to the coldness Mara had grown used to from Baird. "You must be. Sit down, I'll bring you something." Mara didn't argue. She collapsed onto the chair by the table, feeling the weight of the day finally hitting her. She was exhausted, both physically and mentally. She had no idea what had just happened, or what was going to happen next. But something told her that this woman, this stranger, was her only hope. As the woman set a steaming bowl of soup in Colby front of Mara, she took a seat across from her, watching her carefully. Mara picked up the spoon, but her hands were still shaking. "I know you have questions," the woman said softly, her eyes steady. "But I can't give you all the answers just yet. What I can tell you is that you're not alone anymore. You're safe here." Mara looked up, her mind whirling with disbelief. "Safe?" she whispered, still struggling to understand what was happening. "How can I be safe? My stepfather, he sold me." The woman's eyes darkened at the mention of Baird, and Mara noticed her fingers tighten around the edge of her chair. For a brief moment, Mara thought she saw something else in her eyes, something like rage, a burning desire to protect her. "That man," the woman began slowly, "he's not your real father, is he?" Mara shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, he's my stepfather, my real father. He died before I could remember him." The woman nodded. "I thought so. Baird never was a good man, not since your mother passed away. He's been involved in things he doesn't want anyone to know about. But I know the truth." Mara's heart skipped a beat. "What truth?" The woman leaned forward, her voice low. "Baird isn't just a cruel stepfather. He's part of something bigger. Something dangerous. You were never meant to be part of his world, Mara. He thought he could control you, use you for his own purposes." Mara's mind spun. Her stepfather had always been a distant figure in her life, but she had never imagined that he was involved in something as sinister as what the woman was suggesting. Her confusion deepened. "What are you talking about? What does he want with me?" The woman hesitated for a moment, then sighed, as though weighing her words carefully. "I think he sold you to someone in the village, someone who has ties to the darker parts of this world. People who deal in power, in influence, and in things that can change a person's life forever. She paused, her gaze fixed firmly on Mara. And I believe you were never meant to be a pawn in his game. I think you're stronger than that. You can escape from this. And I will help you. Mara's breath caught in her throat. Escape. It felt like a dream, something she hadn't even dared to hope for. But now, with the woman's words hanging in the air, it suddenly felt possible, as though there was a way out of the nightmare. Her life had become. But how? Mara asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and hope. The woman gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. We take it one step at a time. But first, I need to know something, Mara. Are you willing to fight for your freedom? Because it won't be easy. And it won't be quick. Mara felt a fire spark inside her, something deep and raw, something that had been hidden beneath her fear and uncertainty. She hadn't wanted to believe it, but now she realized the truth. She had no choice. If she wanted to survive, if she wanted to escape the life Baird had forced upon her, she had to fight. Yes, Mara said, her voice firm. I'm ready. The woman nodded as if she had expected this answer. Then we start tonight. You're not alone, Mara. You never will be again. As Mara ate the soup, feeling warmth and strength return to her tired body, she knew this was just the beginning. The war was far from over. In fact, it was only just starting, and she was ready to face it. The days that followed felt like a blur to Mara. She had spent her time in the small house, trying to understand the woman's plan and her role in it. But no matter how many questions she asked, the woman remained cryptic, only offering pieces of information at a time. Still, Mara felt an unspoken connection with her, a bond built on mutual understanding and the shared desire to escape from Baird's cruelty. The woman, who introduced herself as Lyra, was not what Mara had expected. She wasn't just a protector, she was a fighter, someone who had clearly lived a life full of danger and risk. There was an air of mystery about her, and Mara quickly learned that Lyra was no stranger to the darker side of the world. On the second night after Mara's arrival, Lyra took her aside after dinner. The fire was crackling in the hearth, casting long shadows across the room. The silence between them felt heavy, as if something was about to shift, and Mara held her breath, sensing that this would be a moment of truth. You're ready to begin, Lyra said, her voice calm but firm. Tomorrow we leave this house and go to the village center. There are things you need to learn about who your enemies really are. Mara frowned, confused. Enemies? But I thought we were escaping. Lyra met her gaze, her eyes steely and full of determination. You can't escape until you understand what you're up against. You can't fight what you don't see. And you need to see it, Mara, all of it. A chill ran through Mara. She had thought that she was merely escaping from Baird and the life he had given her. She hadn't imagined that there were people in the village and perhaps beyond who were actively working against her, pulling strings in ways she couldn't even begin to comprehend. Lyra took a deep breath, then spoke again, her voice more serious than before. Tomorrow you'll meet someone who knows everything about the power Baird is connected to. They're dangerous, but they can help us. They might be the key to finally ending this. Mara's stomach twisted with fear and anticipation. Who are they? And why would they help us? Lyra's expression darkened. They have their reasons. Just trust me for now. You'll understand soon enough. The next morning, the sun barely rising, Lyra led Mara through the village. The streets were empty, save for a few people sweeping the dust from their doorsteps, and the air was cool and crisp. The silence felt unnatural, like a calm before a storm. They made their way through winding alleys and down narrow streets until they reached a large stone building, one that stood apart from the others in the village. It looked ancient, its walls weathered and worn by time. This is where we meet, Lyra said, her voice barely a whisper. Stay close to me, and don't say a word unless I tell you. Mara nodded, her heart beating faster now. Her mind was racing. What could be inside that building? Who was this person that Lyra had spoken of? And why was it so important for her to understand the dangers surrounding her life? Inside, the building was dimly lit, with shadows stretching across the stone floors. It smelled musty, like old books and damp earth. Lyra led her down a long hallway until they came to a heavy wooden door, the kind that seemed like it had been untouched for years. She knocked twice, and after a brief pause, the door creaked open. A man stood in the doorway, his face partially obscured by a hood, but Mara could tell that he was older, with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through her. He studied her for a moment before looking back at Lyra. "She's the one?" The man asked, his voice low and gravelly. Lyra nodded. "She's ready." The man stepped aside, motioning for Mara to enter. As she did, she felt a strange sense of unease. The room was small, cluttered with old books, scrolls, and strange artifacts. The walls were covered in faded maps, and the faint smell of herbs and incense hung in the air. But what really caught Mara's attention was the large wooden table in the center of the room, covered with what looked like papers, letters, and sketches. The man walked to the table, pulling out a chair for Mara. "Sit," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "We have much to discuss." Mara took a seat, her mind still spinning. She could feel Lyra standing behind her, watching, waiting for her to react. The man began to sift through the papers on the table, pulling out a few with strange symbols on them. "This," he said, holding up one of the papers, "is a map. It shows the locations of several places connected to Baird and the people he's involved with. These are the power brokers, Mara, the ones who control everything from behind the scenes. They are the ones who have been using you as a pawn. And they don't take kindly to being betrayed." Mara's pulse quickened as she studied the map. The markings were unfamiliar, but there were locations circled in red, places she had never heard of before. The more she looked, the more she realized just how vast and dangerous Baird's web of influence really was. "But why me?" Mara asked, her voice shaking. "Why did he sell me?" The man gave a sad smile, his eyes dark with the weight of knowledge. "Because you're special. You have a power within you that you don't yet understand. It's not just your size or your strength. It's something deeper. Something they want to control." Lyra spoke up then. "We don't know the full extent of it yet, but we know enough. They've been watching you for years, Mara. They knew what you were capable of long before you did." Mara's mind was reeling. What power? What was she capable of? She had spent so much of her life feeling different, feeling out of place. Now it seemed that her difference wasn't something to be ashamed of, it was something to be feared. The man leaned closer, his eyes locking onto Mara's. "We're going to stop them. But it's going to take everything you have. Are you ready?" Mara didn't answer right away. She could feel the weight of the choice pressing on her shoulders, and part of her wanted to run, to escape this nightmare and return to a life that was simpler, even if it was a life of fear. But then she remembered the cold, cruel face of Baird. She remembered the way he had sold her, as if she were nothing more than a piece of property. "No," she said, her voice steady now. "I'm not running anymore. I'm ready to fight." Lyra smiled, a small, approving smile. "Then let's begin." The morning light filtered through the narrow windows, casting long shadows across the table where Mara and the man whose name was Elias sat. The weight of the map in front of her seemed to grow heavier with every passing second. The paper wasn't just a map. It was a blueprint for destruction, a guide to the complex network of power that had been controlling her life in ways she couldn't yet understand. Elias, who had introduced himself as someone who once worked with the powerful figures Baird was now aligned with, was explaining things that made Mara's head spin. He spoke of a world hidden in plain sight, a world where dark deals were struck in the shadows, and people like Baird, with ambitions larger than life, played their roles as pawns for even greater forces. There's something you don't understand. Yet, Elias said, his voice low. You're not just a victim of your stepfather. You're a part of something much bigger, Mara. They've been tracking you for years, even before Baird sold you. Mara leaned forward, feeling a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. What do you mean? What's so special about me? I've always been different, but I never thought it meant anything. Lyra, who had been standing near the window, her eyes watching the village below, turned around to face her. It's your blood, Mara, your heritage. It's what makes you unique. It's why they want you, why Baird made that deal. Mara's eyes widened. Blood? What do you mean, my blood? Elias looked at Lyra before answering. We didn't want to reveal it this soon, but it's time you knew the truth. You come from a lineage of power. A family who has been targeted by the most influential and dangerous groups for centuries. They want control over you because you're the key to something that could shift the balance of power in their favor. Mara could feel her heartbeat quicken. What kind of power? What do they want with me? The power of manipulation, Elias said slowly, his eyes narrowing. The ability to control minds. The ability to influence not just individuals, but entire groups, even whole nations. Your family was once the secret keepers of that power, a legacy that's been hidden for generations. But someone found it, and now they want it for themselves. Mara's mind spun as the implications of his words began to sink in. She was part of something she didn't even know existed, something dangerous, something that had been buried for centuries. You're saying I have some kind of ability? She asked, her voice shaking. Like, I can control people's minds? Elias nodded. That's what they think, at least. But it's not just about mind control, it's deeper than that. Your power is the ability to influence actions, decisions, emotions, to make people bend to your will without them even knowing it. Mara recoiled slightly, unsure whether to be terrified or fascinated by the possibility. She had always felt out of place, always noticed the way people looked at her, like she was too much, too big, too overwhelming, but this was different. This was something she had never even imagined. Lyra spoke up again, her tone firm. We don't know the full extent of your power, but that's why we have to protect you. And why we need to stop them before they can use you for their own ends. Who are they? Mara asked. Who wants me? And why does Baird want to sell me to them? Elias shook his head slowly. Baird is just a pawn. He's been manipulated into doing this. The people who really want you are members of a secret organization known only as the Syndicate. They are the ones who have been pulling strings for decades, and now they want to use your bloodline to fulfill their ultimate goal. Mara's stomach churned. The Syndicate? She repeated. What do they want with me? They want to control the world. They want power over every government, every leader, every person. They believe your family's power is the key to shaping the future. Mara's thoughts raced, but she couldn't make sense of everything. She felt like she had just stepped into a world full of shadows and secrets, a world where her very existence had been planned out for reasons she didn't understand. The woman she had trusted, Lyra and Elias, someone who had once been part of the Syndicate, were the only things standing between her and the dangerous forces that were coming for her. I don't know what to do, Mara said, her voice quiet. With the weight of it all, how do I fight them? How can I stop something so powerful? Lyra's eyes softened for a moment, and she stepped closer to Mara, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We start small. We take it one step at a time. But the most important thing is this. You are not alone anymore. We will teach you how to control your abilities, how to fight back. But it won't be easy. Elias joined them at the table, his expression grim but focused. We'll start with the basics. You need to understand your power first, and how to defend yourself. The Syndicate has agents everywhere, and they won't stop until they find you. Mara nodded, though the weight of her new reality pressed heavily on her chest. Everything she had known was a lie. Her life was no longer her own. It was a battle for something bigger, something far beyond what she had ever imagined. But in that moment, as she looked at Lyra and Elias, her unexpected allies, she realized one thing. She wasn't going to let them control her. She wasn't going to let them take what was hers. She wasn't going to run anymore. Mara's world had changed in an instant. No longer was she just a girl trying to survive in a world full of neglect and cruelty. Now she was caught in a battle much bigger than herself, a battle against forces that sought to control her forces she had only begun to understand. The weight of what she carried on her shoulders felt suffocating at times, but she wasn't about to let fear control her anymore. Lyra and Elias wasted no time in preparing Mara for the battle ahead. The days turned into weeks as they trained, focusing on Mara's ability to control her powers, to understand what had once been an invisible part of her. They taught her the art of manipulation, how to influence the emotions, actions, and decisions of others. At first, Mara struggled. It felt unnatural, as if she was trying to force something that should come instinctively. But with each lesson, each small victory, she began to feel the power inside her stirring, the potential of her bloodline becoming clearer. Lyra, more than anyone, was determined to help Mara. Every night after the lessons, they would sit together, talking for hours about the syndicate and their plans. Lyra was relentless in her pursuit of information, determined to uncover every detail about the organization that had been pulling Baird's strings. She spoke of their reach, how their influence spread across continents, hidden beneath layers of power, wealth, and secrecy. "There's a man, a leader," Lyra said one night, her voice low and focused. "His name is Darius. He's the one who orchestrated your stepfather's involvement with the syndicate. He's the one who has been pulling the strings." Mara's brow furrowed. "Darius? I've never heard of him." Lyra's eyes hardened. "That's the point. He's the shadow behind it all, the one who never appears in public, who stays hidden in the darkness. But he's dangerous, very dangerous." Mara leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. Everything was moving so quickly, and she was still trying to catch up. She had to stop Darius. She had to stop the syndicate. But how? Elias had been working behind the scenes, gathering intel. He'd spent years as part of the organization, and he knew how it operated. But he also knew the cost of betrayal. It had cost him everything. "Darius won't just stop because we want him to," Elias warned one day. "He's too powerful. He has people everywhere, watching every move we make. If we want to take him down, we'll need to be smart. We need to strike at the heart of the syndicate." Mara nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then let's strike." That night, after the sun set and the village quieted down, they set their plan into motion. Lyra had learned of a meeting taking place in a secluded manor just outside the village inn. Old, crumbling estate that had once belonged to a powerful noble family. The syndicate often used it for their meetings, a place where they could speak freely, away from prying eyes. It was there that they would find the information they needed to take down Darius, but it wasn't going to be easy. The estate was heavily guarded, and the syndicate's most loyal members were always on watch. Lyra had a contact inside, a former ally who owed her a favor, and it was through this contact that they planned to gain access. Mara stood in the shadows outside the manor, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt the cool night air against her skin, her senses heightened. This was it. The moment of truth. Lyra approached her, her expression calm but determined. "You've learned everything you need to know. It's time for you to put it to use. Stay close and follow my lead." Mara nodded, trying to steady her breathing. She was ready. She had to be. The three of them slipped into the manor through a hidden passageway, the darkness enveloping them. The only sound was the soft crunch of their footsteps on the gravel. As they moved swiftly through the corridors, Lyra led the way, her steps confident and quiet, while Elias brought up the rear, keeping a watchful eye on their surroundings. They reached a large room at the heart of the manor, a place filled with ancient books, maps, and strange artifacts, objects that looked like they belonged to another time. It was here that the syndicate held their meetings, where their plans were made and their decisions shaped. The contact Lyra had spoken of was already there, waiting in the shadows. A man with graying hair and sharp eyes, dressed in the same dark attire as the others in the syndicate. His name was Callum, and he had once been a part of the syndicate's inner circle before he'd been cast out. "You're late," Callum whispered, his eyes flicking nervously toward the door. Lyra nodded. "We had to be careful. The less they know, the better." Callum's eyes narrowed as he looked at Mara. "Is this the one?" Lyra nodded again. "This is Mara, the key to everything." Callum studied her for a moment, as though weighing her worth. "Then we don't have much time," he said. "The meeting is about to start. You need to get to the center of the room, where they keep the files. The documents you need are there." Mara's mind raced. She could feel the weight of everything pressing down on her. She had to be smart. She had to use her power control. It manipulated to get what they needed without being detected. The meeting began. Several figures, cloaked in darkness, entered the room, taking their places around the long, ancient table. Mara could hear the low murmur of their voices as they spoke in code, discussing plans and decisions that sounded far beyond anything she had ever imagined. But the most important part of the conversation was just beginning. Mara could feel it, her power rising within her, a deep, almost primal energy surging through her veins. She had learned how to influence the emotions of others, how to make them do what she wanted without them realizing it. But now she needed to take it a step further. She needed to reach into their minds, to see what they were thinking. She focused all her attention on the men at the table, honing in on their emotions, their fears, their desires. It was harder than she expected, the intensity of the power almost overwhelming. But she pushed through, forcing herself to concentrate. Slowly, the room began to shift. The men's voices faltered, their eyes flicking nervously toward each other. The power was taking hold of them, influencing their thoughts. Mara could feel the walls between her and their minds crumbling, one by one. Then she saw it, the file she needed. It was sitting right in front of Darius, who had just entered the room, his presence filling the space with an oppressive weight. He was the leader. He was the one who had masterminded everything. And now he was the one standing between her and the answers she needed. Mara's heart raced. This was it. The time had come. But the question was, could she strike when the opportunity came? Could she use her newfound power to bring down the syndicate from the inside? The atmosphere inside the manor had grown thick with tension, and Mara could feel the power in the air. Her mind raced as she focused on Darius, the leader of the syndicate, who had just entered the room. His cold eyes swept over the gathered members, settling on the pile of documents that sat in front of him, the very documents they needed to bring down his entire operation. She could feel her pulse quicken. Everything she had learned, every lesson in control, had led to this moment. The weight of her bloodline, the power she had only begun to understand, was now coursing through her like a river. She was the key to ending this. She could feel it in her bones. But as her eyes locked onto Darius, she realized that this would be more than just about knowledge and control. This wasn't just about taking down an organization. It was about confronting the man who had orchestrated the suffering of her life, who had pulled her strings and used her like a puppet. The syndicate members continued to talk in low murmurs, unaware of the shift in the room. But Mara wasn't focused on them anymore. Her attention was solely on Darius, who was now leaning back in his chair, his gaze cold and calculating. The aura of authority he exuded was impossible to ignore, and Mara felt the weight of his presence pressing down on her. She didn't have much time. The plan had been simple: get the documents, expose the syndicate's secrets, and escape before anyone knew they were there. But with Darius in the room, everything changed. She had to confront him face to face. Lyra must have sensed Mara's intent because she stepped closer, whispering urgently, "Wait for the right moment. We're not ready to expose ourselves yet." But Mara didn't wait. She COULDN single quotes to dot with a surge of power. Mara pushed forward, forcing the influence she had learned over the past weeks into every fiber of her being. She reached out with her mind, sending a shockwave of control directly into Darius's thoughts. At first, he didn't notice. His hand hovered near the pile of documents, but the moment his fingers touched the edge of the folder, something changed in his posture. His eyes flicked to the side as though distracted. Then his gaze shifted toward Mara. "Mara," he said, his voice a low growl, a mix of surprise and disdain. "So, you're the one they've been hiding." The others in the room stiffened, their gazes locking onto Mara as they slowly became aware of her presence. But it was Darius who held her in his grip, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "You think you can control me?" Darius said, his voice suddenly cold, a dangerous undertone beneath his calm demeanor. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Mara didn't flinch. Her power surged again, this time with more control, more focus. She pushed into his mind, trying to force her will upon him, to make him see that she was no longer the frightened girl he had once used. But Darius was different. He had power, too dark power, ancient and vast. She could feel his resistance, a wall of sheer force blocking her every attempt. "You're nothing but a child playing with fire," Darius sneered, standing slowly. "Do you think you can stop me? I've been planning this for decades. You are just a small part of a much larger plan. A plan you cannot possibly understand." His words cut deep, but Mara held firm. She had to believe that this was her moment. This was the time she would take control, not just of him, but of everything that had been done to her. With a deep breath, Mara gathered all the strength she had left, focusing on the core of her power, the bloodline that coursed through her veins. She reached out with every ounce of her will and thrust it into Darius, not just influencing his mind, but twisting his very perception of reality. For a brief moment, everything went still. The air crackled with electricity. Mara felt herself falling deeper into the battle of wills. She could see the strain in Darius's face, his composure slipping as he struggled to hold on to his control. "You don't know me," Darius hissed, his voice strained. "I am the syndicate. You cannot break me." But Mara was no longer listening to his threats. She focused entirely on his weaknesses, on the cracks in his facade, on the parts of him that feared her and everything she represented. She pushed harder, feeling the mental connection intensify, the barrier between them weakening, and then everything shifted. Darius's eyes widened in shock as his mind shattered under the weight of Mara's power. For the first time, he felt helpless, exposed. His once steady grip on the room faltered, and he staggered back, his hand gripping the edge of the table for support. Mara saw the opening. With a surge of finality, she unleashed all of her strength, forcing Darius to bow to her will, to kneel before the very power he had sought to control. She didn't need to break him physically, she just needed to break his mind, to show him that she was no longer the helpless girl he thought he could own. The room fell silent as the other syndicate members watched in stunned silence, their loyalty to Darius crumbling as they witnessed the power of the bloodline they had feared. Darius's voice was no more than a whisper as he looked up at her, his face pale. "You've won," he muttered, the fight gone from his voice. "But this is just the beginning. There are others who will never let you take control." Mara stood tall, her breath steady, her heart racing. She had done it. She had beaten the leader of the syndicate, exposed his weaknesses, and turned the tables on him. But Darius's final words stayed with her, echoing in her mind. "This is just the beginning." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes full of pride as she looked at Mara, you've done it. You've freed yourself. And now we take this fight to the rest of them." Mara's mind was already moving forward. She could feel the weight of the responsibility ahead, but she also felt something else, something that had been missing for so long. Hope. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about something bigger, a fight for freedom, for truth, for everything that had been stolen from her. And now, with her power under her control, Mara was ready to fight. She was ready to end the Syndicate's reign, to dismantle the empire of lies they had built. Her journey had only just begun.